All of them witnessed speed. Nobody witnessed the trap that McLaren had laid. And now, everyone, including the FIA, stands with their heads scratched. For months, there was no way for teams or even broadcast cameras to reach McLaren's front suspension. Blanketed wheels, blocked vistas, complete silence, and a quiet assurance that said volume. Now we know why. What appeared to be clever brake duct wizardry proved to be something much more sophisticated. A front suspension system that's so aggressive, so finely honed, it's changing the rules of what's possible within the present Formula One rules. And for the first time ever, we can see and know how McLaren's deploying it to take command. Is this really McLaren's true secret weapon? Or merely part of a larger puzzle no other team has cracked? We're about to discover. But first off, if you're enjoying this in-depth look at bleeding-edge F1 tech, be sure to like and subscribe for more. And if you want the whole analysis, keep watching, because what McLaren has done alters everything for behemoths like Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. The warning signs began early way back in Bahrain. McLaren's tire life? Unnaturally good. In Australia, they remained within the operating window longer than anyone else. Then Miami, where infrared left no one in any doubt. The MCL39 maintained its rhythm with a indomitable relentlessness. Red Bull, who've made their fortune from tire management, were perplexed. They noticed moisture developing around McLaren's rear wheels. They noticed brake ducts operating cooler than normal. They noticed a car that didn't boil over, even during 50°C track conditions. So they protested twice. The FIA looked into a taunts in Miami, again later during the season, and came up with nothing illegal. No active cooling, no pumps, no fluid redistribution, just clever exploitation of airflow, geometry, and design. And that leads us to the actual innovation. Photographs and technical examination finally revealed what McLaren had been. They designed a suspension setup so radical, it set new standards on what was possible within the existing regulations: multi-link components, revised upper wishbone, aggressive anti-dive geometry, and brake duct incorporation that melts into the suspension design. This is the sort of setup you only conceal if it's doing something no other driver on the grid can duplicate. And now we know it does. The outcome? A nicely stable aerodynamic platform. The suspension has the car gripped both when braking and accelerating. That translates to more consistent airflow, more predictable downforce, and greater grip lap after lap throughout an entire stint. And here's the important connection. What appeared to be a tire cooling trick? Not really. It was merely a byproduct of a car that doesn't work its tires too hard to begin with. Because McLaren's actual secret weapon lies in the very structure of the car. To appreciate quite how much ahead McLaren actually is, we must begin with one essential idea: platform stability. Since the 2022 ground effect rules took effect, all teams have been struggling with the same war, making the car stable enough to produce constant downforce via the floor. Any pitch, dive, or roll derails the airflow underneath. That's why porpoising was such a nightmare in the early stages, and it's also why suspension geometry became the quiet war in F1 design. Red Bull unlocked it first with the RB18. Adrian Newey's fixation with anti-dive and anti-squat geometries was one of the behind-the-scenes reasons for their initial dominance. But in 2025, it's McLaren who've taken that very principle and driven it to extreme. Their front suspension is the most aggressive version of anti-dive geometry on the whole grid. On first glance, it appeared radical, but for a long time, nobody was able to get a good look. Now, with high-res images and expert breakdowns, we can finally have a look at the truth. What we're seeing is a multi-link setup with a singly positioned top wishbone and an extended lower forward leg. In plain language, this thing is designed for complete control. One of the main tricks? A dynamic virtual steering axis. Basically, it's a means of controlling how the front wheels react under load without using conventional mechanical inputs. It's pretty much a similar concept to Mercedes' previous DAS system, which enabled dynamic toe angle manipulation. But here's the twist: there aren't any moving parts, and nothing is forbidden. It's baked right into the suspension architecture. This virtual axis provides McLaren with an incredibly potent asset: live toe angle variation. On the straights, it varies to minimize drag and cool the front tires. In corners, it changes to quicken turn in response and boost bite. The end result? Tire temperatures stay right in the sweet spot, not too cold, not too hot, with zero added system. And this is backed up by performance data across the season. McLaren has been the fastest team in Sector 3's the low-speed traction-dependent parts of most tracks where tire temperature and mechanical grip matter most. and they've done it consistently. Regardless of ambient conditions, drivers have felt the difference. Lando Norris has described the front end as numb at times, not in a bad way, but in the sense that it's too stable to deliver the usual feedback through the steering wheel. That's why McLaren introduced a minor geometry variation at the Canadian GP, not to improve outright performance, but to give Norris more feel. Oscar Piastri meanwhile declined the update. He stuck with the standard spec, confident in what he already had. Andrea Stella, McLaren's team boss, explained that the updates were tailored to the plays and 26 drivers feel behind the wheel, rather than aiming for more pace. The base car was already delivering grip and consistency. They were just fine-tuning how it communicated with the driver. This is what separates McLaren's innovation from others. Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes are still battling basic setup, gremlins, thermal inconsistencies, unpredictable grip windows, front-rear balance shifts over a stint. McLaren is dialing in the car to match the driver's instincts, and that goes even deeper because the way this suspension stabilizes the chassis under braking and acceleration means that the aerodynamic load stays consistent, especially over bumpy surfaces or through long corners. The underfloor can keep working, the tire surface stays calm, and with that level of control, McLaren's tire wear is significantly sectioned lower even when they push harder across multiple stints. Others spike and fade. McLaren stays locked in delivering stable pace through corners and straights alike. And here's the kicker, no one else has this, not even close. Ferrari is still experimenting with balance and thermal management, decent in races, but qualifying remains an issue. Red Bull is reportedly working on a new cooling solution, but their early season updates didn't close the gap, and Mercedes, they're gaining ground, but their rear geometry improvements are only now starting to stabilize the car. McLaren's system, meanwhile, works in all conditions: hot, cold, rear limited tracks, front limited tracks. It's not dominant in raw top speed, but it's consistent, repeatable racing, and it's all coming from one area: a suspension layout that keeps the car flat, the tires balanced, and the performance curve smooth from lights out to the checkered flag. What you're seeing is full-spectrum performance: mechanical, grip, aero balance, and thermal efficiency, all aligned. A sight that has left the rest of the grid scrambling. Ferrari has been throwing update after update at its front and rear ends, hunting for balance and predictability. Mercedes just brought back its anti-lift rear suspension after briefly shelving it post-Imola. Red Bull, once untouchable in thermal control, is now reportedly deep into simulator testing with new passive compounds and alternate airflow paths. But even if they nail it, it won't happen in time. This kind of packaging, integration, and optimization doesn't get bolted on mid-season. It takes months of design work, and in most cases, a full car philosophy shift. And by then, McLaren could already be out of reach. That's why rivals are looking to 2026 with the new regulations looming. Every team is expected to copy the McLaren suspension concept. It's effective, and now impossible to ignore. McLaren's initial secrecy, the shielded wheels, the closed-up pit box, the tight camera control is over. Now the paddock knows exactly what they've done, and while it's too late to replicate for this year, it won't stay unique forever. That's also why the FIA is stepping in a move that went under the radar. The World Motorsport Council just amended the 2026 technical regulations to explicitly ban any device, system, or procedure that heats, cools, or maintains the temperature of wheels, brakes, or hubs, closing a loophole that many suspected McLaren was exploiting. Even if the MCL 39 isn't breaking rules now, the FIA has made sure no one can take that concept further. The same document added a new rule stating suspension fairings must be internally sealed to prevent any internal airflow, another sign that governing bodies are anticipating a wave of McLaren-inspired tricks in the next regulation cycle. None of this is retroactive. McLaren isn't being punished. They haven't even been formally accused, but the message is clear. Your advantage won't last forever. That gives the Woking Base squad a unique window. They have the best car on the grid. They have tire control that no one else can replicate. They have two young drivers pushing each other without drama. And now they, for the daily, have the clearest technical lead in a field where gains are measured in tenths of a percent even. George Russell admitted it. Most teams can't manage front tire temps without compromising race pace. McLaren can, and they can do it every lap, every track, every compound. So what does that mean for the rest of 2025? It means the constructor's title is wide open. It means Red Bull's championship grip is no longer safe upgrades alone. Won't cut it for Ferrari and Mercedes with consistency. Still out of reach, they're in deeper than they'd like to admit, because McLaren isn't just fast anymore. They're precise, repeatable, hard to shake, and most importantly understood. So what do you think has McLaren already locked up 2025? And can anyone catch them before the regulation reset? Drop your thoughts in the comments and check out the next video on your screen video.